afternoon, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political talk show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior fighting for your right just to be an American. It is October 4th in the year of our Lord 2017. Remember, we're hyphen free, PC free zone, God is still in control and he does love you, and we do what we do here at the Dan Clements Show, knowing the fear of the Lord, we persuade men of the truth. And I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State. And forgive me for the sniffles this morning. Again, my cold is still stomping on my head as I'm going out. I have hay fever to begin with. It's harvest season. Everything's drying out around here, so I'm getting double whammied here with allergies and the remnants of a head cold. So forgive me if I sniffle just a little bit. I'll try not to do it while the mic is still hot. I entitled the show today, I Prefer Dangerous Freedom. And the reason why I did that, and what we're going to talk about today, is some of what the left has been spouting. And I didn't get all the video clips I wanted to get to, like Jimmy Kimmel. I'm going to put a link in the show to Steven Crowder. He did a really good video on rebutting what Jimmy Kimmel said last night. And again, I used to watch the late night shows. My favorite was Jay Leno, The Tonight Show, because they were funny. Here, Jay Leno's a comedian, and he's being funny on a late night talk show. Oh, who knew? Who knew? Who knew comedians could be funny while hosting that? Today's talk shows, the late shows, not funny. Not funny at all. They're all political commentary. We get this all day long. People like me, we get political commentary all day long, and sometimes we want to tune into sports, like football, and don't want to hear about politics. We want to hear about the sports. We want to hear about what's going on inside the sport, whatever, football, baseball, basketball, hockey, whatever it is, NASCAR, golf. We don't want to hear politics. We want to hear sports. We tune into those to take a break from the day, to be entertained and to relax and not have to think about too much. And that's what it used to be with the late night shows. It used to be, they come out in a monologue and they tell jokes and make funny of politicians and some political things. But what it's turned into is a political commentary in their monologues now. And the viewerships, as far as I can find out, aren't as big as they used to be. And there's a reason for that. Just like the NFL, people don't want to tune into the NFL and watch politics. That's not what they're there for. That's not what they want football to be for them. So, again, what's going on today, and it started Monday. Early Monday morning, people were politicizing the Las Vegas shooting. And I knew that was going to happen. If you're a follower of politics like I am, you also knew that this was going to happen also. It's just a foregone conclusion because in our day and age, everything's politicized. I mean, just absolutely everything is politicized. So you knew this was coming. There have been some conspiracy theories out that there's multiple shooters, although there's no evidence of it. People were showing videos. Well, look at these, look at these flashes of light down here on the 10th floor. And yet, if you look at the videos that are showing, the news and everything, showing there's no broken windows. Those hotel windows cannot be open. If you've ever stayed in hotels, you cannot open, for the most part, anything above the first floor. And matter of fact, most hotels I've been in lately, you can't even open the first floor windows. If you want ventilation, you got to open the outside door if you have an outside door. Okay? And none of those had balconies, at that Mandalay Bay Casino and Suites. So I really dislike, to the nth degree, like 10 to the 10th power, conspiracy theorists, because they muddy the water. They absolutely muddy the water with no evidence. It's all supposition and innuendo and, hearsay. And it drives me nuts because, and honestly, folks, I don't wade through it to try to debunk it. There is still the idea going around that the Twin Towers was an inside job. And that was debunked years and years ago. and yet it's still going around. It's just like this idea about silencers or suppressors on rifles or pistols. Too many people are watching Hollywood. They really are. What happens with a silencer or suppressor? They're actually suppressors. There's no such thing as a silencer that's going to take the report off of a heavy caliber weapon. I'm talking 9mm on up. 22s with a suppressor on them can be quieted. Matter of fact, 22s, if you just use a subsonic round, which you can buy for a 22, you won't hear that crack. And you put a silencer on that, and it quiets it down quite a bit. That's a 22. We're talking about a 5.56 round, a 223 round. There's no amount of silence you're going to put on that where you're going to quiet that. You're going to still hear that report. Why are you going to hear it? Because when the bullet leaves the barrel, after it leaves the barrel, that's where you get the crack, because it's breaking the sound barrier. It's no more complicated than that. And so I have Tucker Carlson talking about this in a video that we're going to share with you here after a bit. But the idea that all these things they're talking about, the Republicans taking away the mental health thing. Well, what they're talking about there, if you want to go back and do the research, is Barack Obama signed, I don't know, I can't remember, I was trying to do some research for the show and couldn't get to it, signed either an executive order or signed a bill in place. I think it was just an executive order that was taking guns away from senior citizens on Social Security that were, on certain medicines and stuff like that. And even the American Civil Liberties Union got in on that and said that was wrong because it just arbitrarily took them away. And that's the mental health thing that these leftists out there are talking about. They won't, and this frustrates me to no end. These anti-freedom folks, these gun control people out there, they will not tell you the truth. They use lies and damn lies to try to persuade people. And it causes a lot of confusion because, and this is something that I urge people not to do. Do not trust. Do not trust me. Do not trust any commentator out there until you first verify what they're saying is the truth. Far too often, and my Facebook antagonists out there, Kimberly Eaton, she sent another letter to the editor. I don't know if it's getting published or not. She said right on her Facebook that this can be used. This was for public use. Use it. And and I'm not going to cover it today because I didn't get through it all, but I'm definitely going to be working on that later today and tomorrow, going through point by point and debunking her arguments, because her arguments are full of holes. Her arguments are full of something else, but I'm not going to say. The idea that people trust what's coming out of some people's mouth without verifying it is abhorrent to me. It's abhorrent to me. I don't want you trusting me for what I'm telling you without first verifying. You can trust it, but verify. I've said it many times in the pulpit, and I'm pretty sure Dave has, and most reputable preachers out there, especially those that I know in the churches of Christ, have said at one time or other in their preaching careers that they've told the congregation not to believe what they say until first they go and research and look at the scriptures, make sure they're not taking them out of context, make sure they're not misdefining words, and it's put together in such a way that whatever they're saying doesn't contradict another part of Scripture. I've said that several times in the pulpit. That's a good practice to get into. What I'm sick and tired of is these folks that are in the anti-freedom, anti-gun crowd out there, which would put them squarely in the anti-freedom crowd, are citing statistics that aren't true, are pointing out other stories that don't line up. One of the biggest fallacies, and this one drives me nuts more than any other fallacy. There is evidence out there by people who have either on the census or other means have said that, look, I was in a situation, a self-defense situation. I brandished my gun, and that was it. Or they had to use their gun. Now, if they had to use their gun, there is a police record of that. That's why there's some, and I'll show you the statistic here on the show. If you're watching YouTube, you'll see it. If you're on Blog Talk Radio, you're just going to hear me talk about it. But there is a statistic out there that says there's between, I think it was 500,000 and 5 million folks who have either used their gun in a self-defense and had to actually discharge it, or just by brandishing it or showing somebody that, hey, buddy, I got a gun, back off. And again, a lot of these that, hey, pulling up, your concealed carry and say, hey, buddy, I got a gun, back off, even putting your hand on it would deter a criminal. If you remember me talking about this before, I'm not sure which one it was, but a Detroit police commissioner went through and actually asked questions of the felons that were coming through the system there, and asked them what they were more afraid of, police with guns or civilians with guns. And almost to a man, they said civilians with the guns, because police we can see coming. We don't know who's walking down the street that's carrying a gun, that's concealed carrying, that could stop us. And we've seen the stories out there where a robbery in a store was thwarted by a citizen, and sometimes violently and fatally by a legal citizen with a legal concealed carry, saving lives of other folks. And we know this because then the families of the perpetrator are coming back and trying to sue the person who had the concealed carry that stopped the crime to begin with. Now, in our litigious society, our sue-happy society out here, I don't know how they get away with even trying. I don't know if judges actually throw them out or they let them go through, because most of the time they're civil suits that are happening. But I don't think most of these parents that sue on this basis see the irony in this. Your child was committing a felon with a weapon, threatening the lives of other folks, and they got stopped. Okay? But what I'm saying here, this is what makes me mad about this whole argument that's saying, well, you can't prove those numbers. It goes along the same logic of those in the anti-freedom group that says, well, you can't prove voter fraud. This is not prosecuted that much, so that therefore there is no proof. And what they're doing is they're looking just at what has been prosecuted. They don't go through, and because it wasn't prosecuted, even though the voter fraud was committed, it was just swept under the rug. It's one of those things that they don't take a lot of time to do because they think it's a victimless crime. And partially they're right, but I think mostly they're wrong. It's not a victimless crime if you break the law. If your fraudulent vote cancels a legal vote, a non-fraudulent vote. And so they'll use that logic. They'll use that logic for the voter fraud. You see what I'm saying? But when we use it the same for, of course, we know that there's voter fraud going on. And of course, it stands to reason with all the guns that are out there that there are daily instances of legal permit-carrying citizens that has a firearm concealed on their body thwarting crimes. It just stands to reason, folks, that happens. Now, we never hear about it because that's not news. That doesn't fit the mainstream media's narrative. And one more point before we get into the beginning of the shows here, as far as the Bible reading and stuff like that. I was looking over some of my Facebook antagonists, and not just Kimberly's, but others too, that get after me. I was looking over their feeds. And now, the Antioch church shooting, Antioch, Tennessee, the Burnett Chapel, Church of Christ shooting, I saw no comments on their feeds about gun control after that shooting. None. I didn't see any condemnations. Nothing. And yet, to me, that was just as horrific of a shooting as the Las Vegas shooting. And when I'm not talking in sheer numbers, I'm just talking in loss of life and the senselessness of the gun violence that happened in both places. So they're very selective. Anti-freedom folks are very selective on what they're going to crow about and what they're not going to crow about, what they're going to fight for and what they're not going to fight for. And I'm going to show you some real-time stats, statistics, numbers, raw numbers. And it's just going to blow your mind away. It really is. And it amazes me when I see these numbers. But anyway, let's get on with the show. Do you have an idea for a website? Do you have a hobby you want to share with folks? Do you have a blog and some thoughts you want to put out there on the internet, but you don't know how to do it? But you want a website, you're not sure who you're going to go with. Well, can I suggest to you Bluehost? Now, that's the hosting service I have for the DanClementShow.com, and that's my show notes page, and I put my show notes up there daily. That's the hosting that I use, and the reason why I use them is because I buy the hosting, I get a free domain. That means my .com, the DanClementShow.com. I get free site builders, which I didn't use them myself, but I looked at them and I saw how easy they were. Fantastic on the site builders. Bluehost will take care of the whole thing for you there on those site builders. They have a one-click WordPress install, and I love that because I use WordPress plugins to do everything on my site. And they also have 24/7 support. And right now, they're having back-to-school savings. If you go to the DanClementShow.com and click on the Bluehost widget at the top of the page, it'll take you over to their site. You can sign up, find out what the deals are running today, because they have been changing on a weekly basis, and just find out what deals that they're actually doing over there. And when you do that, they're an affiliate marketer partner of mine, and that will help me support this show and actually grow this show the way I would like to see it grow. Okay, our daily Bible reading, there's actually two verses on our daily Bible reading. First is Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 5, and then we're going to slip over to John chapter 7, verse 24. And there's a reason why I'm reading both of these together. And this is the famous, this is one of the most, in my opinion, in my experience, I should say, Matthew chapter 7, verse 1 is one of the most misquoted, misused, taken out of context verses in all Scripture, in my experience. Judge not that you be not judged. A lot of people say that and they just stop there. I'm like, wait a minute. You're pulling that totally out of context. You got to go through and read why did Jesus say that? And too many people, can I say this? Too many people do not ask questions when they read things. Judge not that you be not judged. Well, why can't I judge? Man, I love to judge people. I love to judge the way they talk, the way they dress, the way they wear their hair, the way they look. I love judging people, some people would say. Why can't I? Well, let's read on. Let's keep this in context and read on. For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. So if you take those two verses in tandem, judge not to be not judged, well, why? For what judgment you judge, you will be judged, and with what measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Well, that's a cautionary thing about judging folks, especially on how to judge, because we have to take these verses all together, okay? And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank that's in your own? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? Hypocrite! First remove the plank from your eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Jesus is saying here, he's not saying you can never ever judge. He's telling you to be careful when you judge. For what judgment you judge, you will be judged. With what measure you use will be measured back to you. And he's saying, why you look at the speck in your brother's eye when you have a plank sticking out of yours? Take the plank out first, and then help your brother with the speck that's in his or her eye. You see what I'm saying? You take all those verses in context. It's okay to judge, but we need to go over to John chapter 7, verse 24, and he says, judge not according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. And Jesus and God gives us plenty of examples of what righteous judgment is. If someone has a problem and you point it out to them, that's not a judgment. That's not a judgment. And if it is, it's a righteous judgment. You're judging, saying, look, you're having a problem with this sin, or you're misquoting this. scripture, or you're teaching this wrong, and you need to be, you need to sit down and correct yourself in this and sit down and reason with folks. You're using judgment and discernment there. And Jesus never said that we shouldn't use it. We just need to be careful when we do. Today's quote meal, I love this one. It actually comes from Thomas Jefferson. And this is part of where I got the title to the show today. I prefer the tumult of liberty to the quiet of servitude. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on here in the show, or as we're actually going through the show. And today's short Bible lesson is by Ben Gesselbach over at plainsimplefaith.com, and he posted this yesterday. When book, chapter, and verse becomes a bad thing. And we were just talking about this. And that's why I had the scripture reading up here, Matthew 7:1. Well, Matthew 7:1 says, judge not that you be not judged. So you can't judge me. That's an example of book, chapter, and verse becomes a bad thing because you're taking that verse out of context and condemning somebody without actually going through and finding out why you're not to judge. And be careful about when you do judge. Okay. Let me get over here and get this set up on the desktop here. Okay. Now this comes from Monticello.org, and they have all these things over at Monticello, or Monticello, however you want to pronounce that, about Thomas Jefferson. And it's, I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery. This is actually a translation of a Latin phrase that Thomas Jefferson used, and I'm not even going to try to butcher that Latin phrase. You'll see it there if you're watching YouTube. It has also been translated as, I prefer the tumult of liberty to a quiet of servitude. Well, here's the sentence in context, and context is key. You've heard me talk about this before. Context is key. It's king. Societies exist under three forms sufficiently distinguishable. 1, without government, as among the Indians. 2, under governments wherein the will of everyone has a just influence, as in the case in England in a slight degree, and in our states to a great one. And 3, under governments of force, as in the case of all other monarchies and in most of the other republics. To have an idea of the curse of existence under these last, they must be seen. It is a government of wolves over sheep. It's a problem. Not clear in my mind that the first condition is not the best, but I believe it to be inconsistent with any great degree of population. The second state has a great deal of good in it. The mass of mankind that enjoys a precious degree of liberty and happiness. It has its evils too, the principle of which is the turbulence to which it is subject. But weigh this against the oppressions of monarchy, and it becomes nothing. Malo, and look, that's that Latin term again. Even this evil is productive of good. It prevents the degeneracy of government and nourishes a general attention to public affairs. I hold it that a little rebellion now and then is a good thing, and as necessary in the political world as storms in the physical. Jefferson to James Madison. Now, I just got to get a tissue here. I like that. And this is what I tell people. I prefer dangerous freedom over a peaceful slavery. Okay? And this is important for us to understand, folks. This is really, really important for us to understand, because this is what's happening. Now, anti-freedom folks will say, well, yeah, we're very good. And I heard a bunch of folks say this on the progressives, the social democrats in this country, the anti-freedom folks. Well, if it's a brown person with a beard, you want to bar them from the country. And to me, that's a racist remark. That's a racist remark. That's like saying you're racist against Mexicans when 1/6 of the population is white, is Caucasian. Mexican isn't a race, it's a nationality. Being Muslim has nothing to do with race. If you're a Muslim, you're an adherent to Islam. Islam has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with ideology. And in the modern world, the jihad. Allah Akbar. God is great. God is great. And then they go kill somebody because God's great. These anti-freedom folks out there are totally off their rockers. I'm serious. They're totally off their rockers. Because they're hoping. They're hoping against hope that you don't realize what they're saying and you don't go research what they're saying. That's why if you heard last night's delivery of just garbage from Jimmy Kimmel, and quite honestly, folks, I'm going to just say that they were fake tears. I watched this clip. You can judge it for yourself. I think they're just fake tears. I think Jimmy Kimmel's really good at turning them on and off. I could be wrong on that, and I can stand to be, I'm not going to be dogmatic about it. If someone proves me wrong, that's fine. That's just my personal opinion about it. And I'm not judging Jimmy Kimmel either way. I'm just saying I don't believe that those are real tears because everything he said in that diatribe was false. And I'm going to try to, like I said, I got the video. I want to edit it and do some other things with it. But Steven Crowder does a really good job. That's why I'm going to put the link up in the show notes page to that video with Jimmy Kimmel. But again, all these leftists out there, they want us to live in servitude to the government. They don't want you and me to be able to protect ourselves against evil. And see, this is one of the things I have against the ethical humanists, and we talked about them a couple weeks ago, and it really comes out in Kimberly's op-ed piece that she sent into the Daily Item. If the ethical humanists recognize the paradigm of good versus evil, then they have to, because under ethical humanists, they have no moral standards that they go by. You know, everything's relative. So if they admit that there's evil in the world, that they have to also admit that there's good, and if there's good, then they have to wonder where that good comes from. Because again, they believe in everything being relative. I believe I'm an objectionist in this stance that, you know, there is objective good and there's objective evil. And people are just beside themselves saying, how could a person just do this? How could a person send 60 souls to meet their maker and injure 500 some more? How, there is such thing as evil in the world, folks. There is such thing as evil in the world. We've seen it. If you look back in history, we've seen it. We've seen it with Mussolini's Italy. We've seen it with Hitler's Germany. We've seen it with Vladimir Lenin and Stalin in Russia. We saw it with Mao's China. We saw it with Pol Pot down in Cambodia, the killing fields. Everywhere. And even today, we have totalitarian regimes in Africa and Asia that just kill their people. They don't care about them. Their people are means to an end. That is pure, unadulterated evil, folks. And it amazes me how many anti-freedom folks out there cannot bring themselves to say, like I said, I got a simple answer why he did what he did, because he's evil. Even if he was coerced, even if he was paid to do whatever he did, because we're still not sure, there's still information coming out, and I know they're not sharing everything with us, and they shouldn't until the investigation's over. But there is evil in the world. And this guy, Mr. Paddock, is evil. There's no question in my mind about that. But the ethical humanists won't call them evil. Folks out there that do not have a moral rudder in their life don't recognize evil. Don't recognize it as a force in this world. And when you don't recognize it as a force, then you're never going to come to the conclusion, at least a satisfactory conclusion or answer to your question, why does this happen? I'm a Christian. God created the heavens and the earth. I'm convinced of that through evidence in the scriptures and in nature. Okay? We have an intelligent designer, if you want to call it that. But God has left so much evidence around pointing to him. It's inconceivable to me how many people want to ignore that. Okay? So and since I do believe that, and I believe we live in what's called a fallen world, Adam and Eve, if they hadn't sinned, would we still be living in paradise today? And that would presuppose that everybody that came after them lived in perfect harmony with God. That's a good thought exercise to have, but it's not practical, because somewhere along the line, somebody, if it wasn't Adam and Eve, somebody along the line would have disobeyed God and his rules. So since God created the earth, God created Adam and Eve, gave them some simple rules. You know, you can eat this, you can't eat that. And they broke those rules. Sin entered into the world. We live in a fallen world. Now, that doesn't mean that Adam's sin is passed down to me, that I'm guilty of his sin. That's a wrong idea about sin, but because of his sin, the consequences of that sin is passed on to the rest of the world. The wages of sin are death. And death is physical, or not physical, but it is a physical separation. But in the contents of scriptures, death is a spiritual separation between man and God. And we suffer from that today because sin entered the world through Adam and Eve. Now, when Christ came, he entered the world. And since he entered the world, he was the second Adam. Because of his death on the cross and the remission of sins through our burial and baptism, we've been relieved of that guilt of sin if we follow what God wants us to do. Okay. So we live in a fallen world. And, you know, I get real tired of seeing these people put these quotes out. Well, you know, prayers are okay, but prayers to God didn't stop this. No, you're right. It didn't stop this, because we live in a fallen world. Evil men are going to do evil things. Evil people are going to do evil things. But you know what I look at in Las Vegas? I look at everything that happened post that. I'm not saying I want these type of things to happen. It's just like I didn't want my daughter to be born with special needs. And there's a group of people out there that, well, if we'd have known that before she was born, we could have aborted her. You know, saved all this hassle. I don't believe that. I think the emotional scars on aborting a child like that would run too deep. But on the other hand, if we don't have tragedies, if we don't have these special needs children that are born, how in the world can we practice our humanity? How in the world can we show anybody our humility, our humanity? If there was nothing bad that went on in the world, and God just took all this evil out of the world so we don't have to suffer this evil, and if we're not suffering harm or evil or anything like that, how are we ever going to be able to show our humanity? That means we're going to be running around here like a bunch of automatons. We don't have free will anymore if God does that. Do you want God? I ask people this, and they sort of quit the conversation right after this. I'm saying, you know, I say, do you want God? If you want God to take evil out of the world and bad things, how come God lets all these bad things happen? You want God to take all these things out of the world. Are you ready and willing to give up your free will? And they're like, what? They don't think these things through. They don't take them to the logical conclusions. They don't see the unseen. And far too many people go through the world acting like this. They do not see the unseen. And that's a perfect example. They don't think about these things. Now, do I want suffering in the world? No, I don't want suffering in the world. I don't want people to suffer. I don't want these families, either in Antioch or Sandy Hook or Las Vegas now, any of these mass shootings. And you got to define mass shootings. In America, mass shootings are defined at least 4 people dead. I think it's 3 or 4. I think 4 is the minimum. 4 or more people are dead due to, you know, a mass killing. I mean, Jonestown, back when I was in high school, that was a mass killing. because it killed everybody. It was more than 4. I can't remember the exact number, but it killed everybody, not with guns, but with poison. That was a mass killing. So you got to define your terms, mass killings. All right, let me go over and get this other. I got some charts I want to show you here, and this is Gun Violence Archives, and this is actually the 2017 numbers. And I want to get this, my picture swollen up there just a little bit, get it a little bit smaller there, so you can see everything. Now this is Gun Violence Archives is a non-for-profit corporation formed in 2013 to provide free online public access to accurate information about gun-related violence in the United States. GVA will collect and check for accuracy, comprehensive information about gun-related violence in the U.S., then post and disseminate it online. Okay? I keep forgetting what camera I'm looking at here. Now, if you're on YouTube, you'll see some of these numbers here. In 2017 so far, total number of incidents, this isn't gun deaths, this is incidents with a gun, is 46,805. Now that's a high number. Okay, but I got another. I have another chart I want to show you here in a few minutes here. Number of deaths resulting in gun violence. Now, gun violence, 11,716. Now, I couldn't find out, and there's a read more here, and I didn't have time to go completely into that. I'm going to look at if they actually break some of these numbers down, and they do have some references on these. Number of injuries is 23,756. That was gun violence, that didn't result in a death. Number of children age 0 to 11 killed or injured. And there's a footnote down here. Actual number of deaths and injuries, number of incidents reported and verified. Okay, the children, number of children age 0 to 11 is 548. One's too many in my book, okay? But the number of children age 0 to 11 killed or injured. That's both. They don't split that out here. They might in this other place. I just wanted to show you this real quick here, and you can go, and the link will be up on the show notes page here when I put it up on the show notes over at danclementshow.com. Number of teens age 12 to 17 killed or injured, 2,442. Now, I have to believe a lot of that number is due to gang violence, but I'll read into some more of that and talk a little bit more about this tomorrow. Mass shootings. Mass shootings, again, you got to define it. Here in the United States, mass shootings are designed for more deaths. Okay? So there was, by mass shootings, it was 273. Okay? Now this is out of this total number of incidents, 46,805. Officer-involved incident, officers shot or killed. Now these are officers, either the officer shot or killed them. Okay, and this is 232. Mass shootings 273. Officer-involved incident 232. Officer-involved incident suspect shot or killed 1,560. Again, we got to go in. I'm looking for more reports to break these down. Home invasion. People killed now these are people coming in and killed in home invasions. We don't know if this is actually the homeowner and the perpetrator or just the perpetrator. Is 1,871. Defensive use, 1,527. That's talking about someone that uses their personal firearm and kills somebody. Defensive use. And unintentional shooting, 1,517. And you see the map, if you're on YouTube, you see the map there. Incidences in 2017 are heavily concentrated east of the Mississippi. Okay. Now, total number of incidences, 46,805. Remember that number. Now, this here is a real-time current death toll from January 1st, 2017 to October 4th, 2017, as of 12:40 a.m. And you see if you're on YouTube, you'll see that that's updating as we're talking. Okay? Right now, and this is the number that just irks me, that the anti-freedom folks, when you bring it up, they go ballistic over. The number one reason for death in America, by number, is abortion. 827,194 abortions have been performed in the United States as of today, from January 1st to today. Heart disease, 46,000 or 465,367. And it goes on to cancer, tobacco, obesity, medical errors, 190,476. And the reason I'm bringing these out, should we outlaw doctors? Because 190,476 people died because of medical errors. Okay? Accident, unintentional. 103,060 people unintentionally died due to accident. Alcohol, 75,750 deaths due to alcohol, related to alcohol. Diabetes, 57,940 died because of diabetes, not taking care of it. Now, folks, we're starting to get down towards the bottom of the list, and I haven't seen homicides yet. Haven't seen them. Okay? Suicide, 32,401. Drunk driving, 25,610 deaths by drunk driving. This is the stat I wanted to get to. The drunk driving stat. Homicide. The homicide is all homicides, right? 12,765. Murder by gun. Actual deaths that murders. That somebody committed a murder with gun. 8,706. To hear the anti-gun folks out there, the anti-freedom folks, talk about murder by gun deaths that are perpetrated willfully by guns. Now, 8,706 is nothing to sneeze at. It just isn't. That's 8,705 more deaths that need to be. But remember, we live in a fallen world. Drunk driving. And the reason why I bring this up is I think drunk driving is just as bad as murder by gun. Because you are on purpose getting in that vehicle after drinking, and I don't care if you know it or not, you are impaired. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You are prepared. And drunk driving deaths are over 4 times as many as murder by gun. Murder by gun. Now, folks, to me, that's a ridiculous stat. And yet, you bring up the argument because you're using their argument, you're using the anti-freedom folks' arguments against them. You bring up this argument and tell them that we should outlaw cars. Or there's actually been people in states anyway, I don't think the federal government has any business doing this, but there's been some states have been flirting with the idea of legislation of putting a breathalyzer in every car. And before you can start it, you have to breathe on something. Some people are proposing, there's some technology out there with everybody's got smart keys on these newer vehicles now that they put something on there, you have to breathe on that, it activates the key, okay? And I don't know how, maybe you can give it to your partner that has been drinking. I don't know why your partner hasn't been drinking will allow you who's been drinking to drive and get in the vehicle with you. That'd be kind of stupid. But there has been some idea of legislation to put some type of breathalyzer in the car. So if there is alcohol in your breath, it won't allow you to start the car. Okay? To me, that's fantastic. If they do it at a state level, if the folks in that state want that done. Now, that's going to put an extra cost on the vehicles and that, but you have 25,610 deaths caused by drunk driving so far in 2017. These are real-time stats here. I actually bookmarked this one because I thought this, first time I seen this is fantastic. And I went back and looked at their metrics, and I think they're pretty good. They may not be 100% accurate, but I think they're pretty good on here. So my point is, and I'm not saying, look, folks, death by gun is a bad thing. But when you put that above all these other deaths, like drunk driving and like abortion, we're talking about 8,700. We're talking about 8,700. Let me just, I'm going to do this on the desktop so you can see what I'm doing here. I have a calculator here. We're talking about, let's see, 828. Let's just to make it 828, 1, 2, 3. Divide that by 8,700. There are 95 times more. 95 times more babies being killed in the womb than there are people being killed by gun. Now let me just do that one more time to make sure I got that right. 828, 1, 2, 3. Divide that by 8,700. Yeah, 95.172. Okay, I probably had it underneath my picture. I'm sorry for that. 95 times more babies are killed in the womb than people are killed by gun. Now, again, I don't want to belabor that too much, but it's a stat that just cuts me to the quick, because these ethical humanists, these relativists out there, they don't look as abortion as murder. I don't know what it is if it isn't. You're taking a life. Again, they want to redefine what life is, and I'm sorry, they don't get that right to do that. Life begins at conception, period. The purpose of a woman becoming pregnant is to procreate, to bring forth life into this world. And if you stop that process, you are snuffing out a life. You are committing murder. You are killing an unborn child. I'm not gonna labor that much anymore, but folks, that's exactly what it is. Now, this is what's happening here with the. I just want to go back over and resize my picture again because I want you to be able to see my lovely face. Okay. I love Tucker Carlson because he doesn't pull any punches. He really doesn't. I need to get a drink here real quick. Now, Tucker Carlson has his own show, and he had this gentleman on there, and he was talking about, he tells gun control dem to know what you're talking about before trying to change our laws. And this is over at cnsnews.com, posted yesterday. And there's a video. Let me get over to the other side over here. And there is a video I want to play for you here real quick. But let me get things set up here. Momentito here.
So Hillary Clinton's tweet was, the crowd flooded at the sound of gunshots. Imagine the deaths if the shooter had a silencer. Why would a silencer have made the deaths the higher number of deaths?
Well, first, Tucker, you know, my heart aches and my hands pray for the victims.
Amen.
With deep gratitude for the first responders. If they ran into a building not knowing where he was shooting, I think her point is Congress is considering not doing more to prevent mass shootings, but actually the only legislation around firearms is to allow silencers. And I think a lot of the
concert goers... What does that have to do with this, though? She said, imagine the deaths if the shooter had a silencer. Do you think she thinks a silencer would make a rifle silent? Does she think that? Because if she thinks that, maybe she shouldn't be weighing in on it.
Social media has given us thousands of perspectives on this shooting, and you look at most of them running to the sound of gunshots. And so if a silencer was allowed, if people could buy it, maybe they wouldn't have heard the gunshots and more people would have died.
But see, I guess that's what bothers me, when policymakers weigh in on things about which they know nothing. So a silencer would not silence a 223 on automatic fire. It might suppress it some, but it's loud as hell. You have to wear earplugs, even with a suppressor on the end.
And with the concert going on,
so most people might not know that, but if you're going to weigh in on it, and we're all sort of obligated to take your opinion seriously, maybe you should know what you're talking about, but she doesn't. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's emblematic of this entire debate. Nobody pushing for gun control can name a single piece of gun control legislation that would have prevented this or any other shooting, unless I'm mistaken, unless you've got one.
Well, it's still early. It hasn't even been 24 hours.
I totally agree then. Why are all these Democrats jumping up and down about the national tragedy of the NRA and we need more gun control? What gun control exactly would have ended this?
Well, I think when you watch so many people who are helpless and running, you think that our lawmakers under the Capitol dome were not helpless. Before the trigger is squeezed, you're actually able to do something. So whether it's universal background checks, whether it's ammunition restrictions, whether it's making sure we don't have silencers, or, of course, making sure that a weapon of war is only in the hand of a warrior.
Stop! You're doing exactly what you just conceded is false and unhelpful. You're throwing so-called silencers into it when we both know that that would have had no effect at all. So, look, you're a lawmaker. Hillary Clinton tried to be the president of the United States, came pretty close. Don't people like you and her have an obligation to know what you're talking about before you try and change our laws?
I know what I'm talking about, and I look at the fear that people have, and I think they expect from us to at least have a dialogue. Let's have a task force of Republicans and Democrats.
But it shouldn't be a fact-based dialogue, not a...
Of course.
Because this isn't a dialogue. This is a soliloquy designed to make the rest of us angry and fearful. A dialogue is when I say, here's what I believe in, here's why. But that's not what she's engaging in. That's not what Senator Ben Cardin is like. We need to ban automatic weapons. They're already banned. They've been banned since the Great Depression. These people have no idea what they're talking about. Why don't they be quiet until they learn something?
I think a lot of us are tired of just being quiet. And I think there are a lot of good Republican ideas around mental health. And the last guest mentioned prescription drugs. Let's talk about all of that. But let's do more than just be silent.
Okay, I'm totally for that. I'm for a real conversation. Something strange is going on in America. I'm 48. This was not a feature of my childhood. This is a new thing, and something is causing it. But the prescription from the left is always the same. Ban certain guns, ban certain bullets, ban certain magazines, silencers. And yet they don't feel an obligation to explain how that would solve the problem because they know it wouldn't, because that's not their agenda.
So
and that's what scares me.
Tucker, tonight, Congressman John Lewis, Mike Thompson, John Larson are asking Speaker Ryan, let's just have a bipartisan task force. Put everything on the table. Let's look at the facts of this shooting and others, but let's do something and show that we're not helpless. We can actually address this issue, and hopefully in a bipartisan way.
Why would I trust someone who points to silencers within hours of this shooting as the cause or an exacerbating factor? That's like moronic.
Because silencers would make more shootings like this actually easier to accomplish. And Congress now...
But how exactly does that happen? I mean, so you're sticking with that talking point? Because that's not true. Have you ever fired a weapon with a suppressor on it? What kind?
So, AR-15.
With a suppressor on it?
I was a prosecutor, Tucker, so we'd go out and look at the weapons that were taken off the streets.
So you fired an AR-15, shoots 5.56.
It doesn't silence completely. It suppresses the sound, which shot spotters won't pick up. It makes it harder for victims to hear it. And so it's just another tool to disguise.
No, but are you being serious? So you've actually fired the rifle with a suppressor on it, and you're telling me that you didn't have to wear earplugs when you did that?
It suppresses the sound. But Tucker, the point
Wait,
here...
did you have to wear earplugs when you did it?
You should always wear earplugs if you're shooting for safety.
Because you're going to go deaf otherwise, because that's how loud... I just shot one the other day. It's super loud. So if you've done that, you can't look at me straight in the face and say, they would be undetectable. Are you kidding?
But with a concert blaring like it would be a lot less noisy. But Tucker, the point here is, let's just convene. Let's have a conversation.
Okay, but we have to have a rational conversation. We can't have people pointing to silencers or flash suppressors and saying that's the problem.
Republicans imminently will vote to allow silencers. That will make it easier.
They protect people's hearing. It would have nothing to do with this shooting. That's insane, and you know it. You fired the rifle yourself. That's not the answer. Can we be real?
No, dialogue is the answer.
Right, dialogue. That's what we're doing. Congressman, thank you for coming on, as always.
My pleasure.
I love it. I love it. All right. This Democrat congressman would not get off that talking point. It was like, you either say this or you're done. It was like someone was threatening him about the suppressors. You cannot totally take a 5.56 round and silence it. Now, there's a program on one of the cable channels years ago, Sons of Guns, and they were asked to make a silencer for a 12-gauge shotgun. And it took it from the decibels up into the hundreds. You know, maybe, I can't remember, it was like 180 or 190, something like that, the decibels on a full, a full open choke 12-gauge shotgun. and they built a suppressor for that. Now they're firing slugs through it, obviously, and they only dropped it down to like 90 decibels. You could still hear it. You could still hear it from a great distance. 90 decibels is not quiet. Okay? And it just amazes me how these narratives continue to go, and it's almost like the Energizer Bunny. Keeps on going and going and going and going. Just like on Jimmy Kimmel. He talked about the gun show and online loophole that you can buy guns online or at a gun show. No, you can't. And for you to come on national TV and just keep perpetrating that lie or perpetuating that lie is ridiculous. You cannot buy at a gun show unless they have background checks at the gun show, and some do. But let's go to the online. Online loophole. I can buy a gun on there and get sent direct to my house. No, it doesn't. Federal law prohibits that. I can buy a gun online, but it has to be sent to a federal firearms dealer. And then I go in and spend a couple extra dollars to have him process everything. I got to pass a background check with him before he can give it to me, and I pay a fee for him handling it. It's not a loophole. There's no loopholes. But there's people on the left that are going to believe that because they won't research it. And those people that are in the anti-freedom groups and the gun control crowd, they know that the vast majority of Americans are not going to research their facts. They're going to say, well, they trust me because I'm a public figure and I should know what I'm talking about. I'm sorry, if I had a dime for every public figure that, people claim that to be, I'd be rich. I would be rich. Again, trust but verify. You can trust what Jimmy Kimmel says, but you need to go verify it before you take it on wholeheartedly. And evidently Jimmy Kimmel doesn't have any researchers. They're perpetuating a talking point, a narrative inside an echo chamber because they have one goal in mind when it comes to gun control. They don't want Americans to have guns, period. Kimberly Eaton and her minions and everybody else that thinks the same way she does not want to have guns in the hands of Americans, period. That's their end goal. And folks, it doesn't matter. If that guy wanted to, if we didn't have a single gun in America legally, and he still wanted to get guns, he could get them. They can get gotten, folks. They can get gotten if you want them. And again, I would rather live in a dangerous freedom than I would a quiet servitude. It's just that simple, folks. And whenever there's freedom, you're going to have this type of stuff because there is evil in the world. This has been the Dan Clemens Show. I'm your host, Dan Clemens, your constitutional warrior. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, folks, and God bless. And we'll see you tomorrow at noon.